So let's get started. For those of you who don't know, my name is Kayleen Harrington, and I've recently joined the Norfolk Chamber of Commerce as their event manager. So I really hope that you are enjoying our recovery programme, as it's been designed to support businesses to restart, rebuild and renew. Good leadership is always important. In times of crisis, it becomes essential. Yet with thousands of potential leadership theories out there, it's difficult for business leaders to know where to start. In this 90-minute virtual masterclass, Mark Williams, business coach at Action Coach, will help you understand which styles of leadership deliver the best return in the long term and the hidden pitfalls of leading from the front. Walk away knowing the 6 key factors that produce a high-performance workplace and how leaders can create them. So following each section of the presentation, there'll be a live Q&A where Mark will answer any of your questions. So please use the Q&A function when you have a question. So before I hand over to Mark, just to let you know that we will be sharing a copy of his presentation along with any other useful bits and pieces that he talks about, and we'll also be sharing a copy of the recording when it's available. Hi Tom from Thurn Group in Acle, making drone carried dipping sonars for energy engineering and environmental surveys in rivers. Oh, that sounds fascinating. I want to know more. I'm just going to be chasing up the naughty people that haven't logged in yet. So I'm not being rude. If you see my head going like this, I'm not ignoring Mark. I'm not doing work. I'm literally doing the background admin stuff. So please don't think that. I just think it's so rude. And I have to tell people that I'm not working. I'm doing the background admin stuff. Morning, Catherine Richard here from East Norfolk Sixth Form. Oh, thank you so much for joining us. So Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Kelly. I'll share my screen. So hi everyone. What I'm going to do today is talk about leadership that gets results. My background is in leadership development. I've been doing that. I did that for about 25 years before I became a business coach in Norfolk. And I've been teaching this model of leadership that I'm going to share with you today all over the world, really. It was developed by a company that I worked for. I was a partner in, a company called Hay Group. And then actually it was published in the Harvard Business Review, and it was published under the name of Daniel Goleman, who you may know about. Dan Goleman took the Hay Group data and turned it into some great books around emotional intelligence and stuff like that. So this is that's the foundation of what I'm going to share with you. It's based on Harvard Business Review article, but it's also based on my 25 years of experience of delivering this stuff and working with leaders to help them improve their businesses. So just before we get started, here we go, who am I? So Norfolk born and bred. I've moved back to Norfolk about 3 years ago, having lived abroad for a while. And I've moved back to about a mile and a half away from where I grew up, which was North Elmham, which is just north of Dereham. I left Norfolk when I was in my late teens to do a psychology degree. And then, as I say, I've spent 25 years coaching, developing leaders from all over the world, from many of the world's leading companies, the likes of Microsoft, BP, BT, Vodafone, and so on. I was a senior partner with a global management consultancy. We got bought out, which was good news and bad news at the same time. And a few years ago, I decided that actually I wanted to step off that corporate treadmill, and I wanted to do something which fitted in better with the life that I wanted to live, and but also help smaller businesses. So really this stage in my career is about helping Norfolk business owners to get the life that they want out of their business. So helping them to grow their business so that it serves them. Whereas often I see it the other way around. Very often the business becomes their life, and that's not really how it should work. So that's really me in a nutshell. There's much more to tell you, but I shan't bore you. In terms of learning outcomes, things that you can expect by the end of this masterclass. Well, the first thing I would encourage you to do is take plenty of notes. Okay, there's quite a lot of content in here. The content that I'm going to cover today, we can easily turn into a 2 or 3 day leadership program. Okay, so there's quite a lot. Do take notes, take the most out of it that you can. But by the end of this, you'll have learned a model of leadership. You should be able to apply it in your business. So there's not a business that I've met yet where they can't apply this model. You will know what your people need. There are six dimensions that people need to actually perform at their optimum level, their maximum potential. So I'll share that with you, and you can think about actually how well are you doing in giving that to your people. I'll talk you through 6 different styles of leadership that impact performance, and we'll touch upon when to apply those styles, when they're useful, but also importantly when they're less useful, so when they're less appropriate to use. And really what I want you to use this for is to increase your own awareness of your own leadership. So applying this leadership model, thinking about actually how do I lead and what impact is that having on my team, and am I really getting the most out of them? So we have a saying in Action Coach that the only failure is the failure to participate. Okay, so what I would ask, I've lined Kayleen up a bit wrong there. Questions in the chat box. Any comments in the chat box or responses in the chat box? But if you have questions, if you can put them in the Q&A, and Kayleen will monitor that, curate it, and then we'll have sessions at the end. But I would encourage you, please do participate. The other thing that I will say, we've all been on webinars for a very long time now. It feels like forever. It's very easy to get distracted. So is there anything in your environment that you need to make a change to make sure you get the most out of this webinar? That might be moving your phone away. It might be closing another window on your laptop. Is it something that you need to do to make sure that actually the time that you're spending is focused and actually you take the maximum value from it? If there is, I just encourage you to do that to make sure that you get the most. The other thing is hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun. Leadership can be a bit dry or it can be a bit fun. So do chip in. The more participation we have, hopefully the more fun it will be. And I'll do my best to answer your questions in the Q&A sessions that we have. So let me start with testing that kind of participation. So in the chat box, let's have a stab at answering this question. So what percentage of UK workers did Gallup find to be engaged at work when they did their last meta-analysis or their analysis of the whole of the UK? Okay, so just put your figure, what percentage of UK workers are highly engaged at work, according to Gallup, the leading measurers of employee engagement. Pop that in the chat box and let's see what we get.
Wow, they're coming in thick and fast. Okay.
Good.
So we've got Thomas has said 60%. Okay. Rosalind, love that name, 30%. Catherine, 25%. John, 40%. Tonya, 65%. Karen, 20%. Kath, 35%. Chris, I love this, 34%. Was that intentional or did you miss the 5 accidentally? Leanne, 50%. And Paul, 45%. And Leah, 10%.
Leah's very sceptical, and Leah's the closest to the right figure. The actual figure was 8%. 8, not 80, not 18, 8. So if we think about what that means for businesses and performance of businesses, there's all this mass of potential that we're not tapping into because we're not fully engaging people through leadership. And what I'm going to share with you today is that actually the #1 impact on people's engagement at work is based on the environment the leader creates for them, and the biggest impact that has is the leader themselves and how they lead. Okay, so there's massive untapped potential in the UK economy if we can just lead them that bit better, if we can create a better culture, a better climate for them to work in and give their best and operate at their best performance. So here's the model that I'm going to talk you through, and this is what we'll base the presentation on. And this is called the 4 circle model. I'll just explain it and how it works. So in any situation or in any business place, you've got a couple of things that impact on behavior. So the first is the situation that you find yourself in. For some people, that might be their job. Okay, so what is it that the job demands? What is it that it requires you to do? Will impact on how you behave. It might be the context that you're operating in. So in COVID, your behavior may have changed because the situation changed. So again, maybe it was a bit more of a crisis situation. You had to pivot, you had to move quickly. So the situation plays a big part on how people behave and how leaders behave. The other thing that it interlocks with, though, is the person. So who am I? How do I see myself? What are my skills? What's my knowledge? What do I believe I'm here to do? What are my values? What are my personality traits? And if we combine those two factors, the situation we find ourselves in and the person that I am, that's what ultimately leads to behavior. So we sometimes talk about behavior being a function of a person in a given situation. Right? Not everybody reacts the same to certain situations, but it does lead to behavior. Now, when we talk about leadership styles, effectively that's just a categorization of different leadership behaviors. Okay, so when I talk about the 6 leadership styles today, I'm going to be talking about 6 types of behavior that people tend to engage in leadership. All right. And the reason that that's important is that actually the #1 determiner of climate is the leadership style. So that if you're a leader in your business, what it feels like to work for you is not down to the environment, it's not down to COVID, it's not down to all of those things, as much as it is about actually your leadership. Okay, so between 50 and 70% of climate is dictated by the leadership styles that the leader uses. Okay, so as a leader, you have a huge impact on what it feels like to work for you. And the reason that's important is that climate accounts for around 30% of discretionary performance. Okay, so when we come to work, if we perform at our best, we can give more. Okay, we tend to perform high. When actually we're keeping our heads down, maybe we don't know what we're doing, we tend to perform less well. So if we can get those things right, if we can get you using the right leadership styles to create the right environment for your people, we can tap into around 30% more performance. And if there's any business that doesn't want 30% more performance out of their people, then let me know. So that's the model. What I'll do is I'll take you through leadership styles. We'll then have a bit of a Q&A session or any comments or observations, and then we'll move on to the climate side, and we'll work out, you know, what you can do in your business or with your leadership to try and be as effective as you can and untap that, hopefully more than 8% in Norfolk of engaged employees. So as I go through this, there are a few things to keep in mind. Okay, I'm going to talk about 6 leadership styles. There might be some that you like, there might be some that you don't like the sound of so much. There are no intrinsically good or bad styles. There are styles which are appropriate in given situations and less appropriate in given situations. But there are some that tend to be more motivational in the long term. They tend to positively impact employee engagement in the long term. And we'll touch on which those are. I've already mentioned, for those of you who love a formula, that's not particularly me, but B equals F bracket P colon S is behavior as a function of a person's situation. Okay, so that everybody in different situations will behave in different ways. And then the last thing on leadership styles is the perceived intention is key. So perception is other people's reality. Okay, if they perceive that you're using a leadership style, then in their mind you're using it, regardless of whether you think you're using it or not. So actually, the intention, how you communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it is really key. Okay. So, 6 leadership styles. I'll take you through them one by one. What I'd suggest is, if you've got a piece of paper, just mark yourself as you go through, as you're taking notes, mark yourself out of 10 for each of these styles, how much you think you use it. So if you think you use it several times a day, kind of all the time, give yourself a 10. And if you think, you know what, I never ever use that, give yourself a 1. Okay. And we'll just see, that'll just give us a little bit of an indication as to which ones we think we use the most when we have a bit of a chat later. If you'd like to put it in the chat box as well, please feel free. I'm hoping that some of you might have some blinding flashes of the obvious, that you realize that actually I am using this, or I need to use that more, or I need to use that less. So that's really the intention behind this. Okay, so let's jump in. So the first style is what we call the coercive style. It's sometimes known as the directive style. We softened it a little bit as time went on, but the original is the coercive style. The primary objective of using this style is to get immediate compliance. So it's to get other people doing what you want when you want it. and that tends to be right now. Okay, so people, if you use this style, you tend to give a lot of directives. You tell people what to do. You leave them in no doubt about the task that needs to be completed. Quite often, how it needs to be completed. You might go into detail. And you're expecting immediate employee compliance. So in other words, you're not expecting to have a chat about it. You're not asking what other people think or discussing the pros and cons of your approach. You're basically telling them this needs doing, do it now, get on with it. So I've put the Nike swoosh, the just do it, just as a kind of visual reminder. This is very task focused and about getting stuff done now. So if you use this style, you tend to control quite tightly. Okay, you tend to keep on top of the situation. You tend to monitor progress against task. How are you getting on with this? Have you done that thing that I asked for? When can I expect that? And the temptation with this style is that actually the feedback that tends to be given is negative corrective feedback. So coercive leaders tend not to say so much which is positive, but they tend to find what was wrong with something, because actually their focus is getting it right and getting it done now. Okay, so the feedback tends to be negative and corrective about what was wrong rather than what was right. I left I always use this last one because it's a classic consultancy phrase, which doesn't really mean much, but motivates by stating the negative consequences of non-compliance. What that means is, if this doesn't happen, then this will. All right, so if this good thing doesn't happen, this bad thing will happen. Now, that can be said with a smile on the face. It can be, if we don't get this out, then the customer won't get it. It doesn't have to be, you know, if you don't do this, you'll be sacked. But underneath it is a kind of intention. That's where the coercive name comes from, is we need to get this done, because if we don't, there's a problem. Okay. So very quickly in the chat box, let's have a quick, any comments around when this is an appropriate style to use? Okay, with millennials, interesting. Be interested to understand at some point, emergency planning, yeah, definitely. So actually when there's a crisis, great, a couple of emergencies come in. Crisis, emergencies, when things just need doing right now. So if my house goes on fire, my home office, if it's going on fire and I've got a guest here, they're not going to want me to coach them out of it. They're not going to want me to ask them what do you think is the best way out of here? They just want something, tell me how to get out of here, how to get me to safety. Manage the crisis. And when you need something done quickly, absolutely. Yeah, so really good style for actually when there's a crisis, something just needs to get done, something's falling short, and actually there's urgency in the position. If it's used long-term though, it tends to be demotivating, okay, because it tends to stifle employees. It means that the boss has to make all the decisions, so employees don't get much latitude, but also it can weigh quite heavy on the boss because they feel they have to be in control of everything, and they're spinning plates and they're trying to juggle everything. So good for short-term tasks, good for an emergency, good for a crisis, but long-term, because it tends to focus on the negative, can be demotivating. So it's a bit like chili sauce. Use with caution, don't splash it all over everything. Unless you like that kind of thing. Okay, so that's coercive. Second style is the authoritative style. So if the coercive style is about tell, then this style is about sell. This is about selling the benefits of going in a particular long-term direction and setting out a vision. Right? So leaders who use this style, they develop and articulate a clear vision. They know where they're heading, okay? And that's their guiding point for everything, right? They're always thinking about, actually, where are we trying to get to here? They will take employees' perspectives on the vision. So it's not completely dictatorial, but ultimately they will own the vision and they will see selling the vision as really key. So lots of talk about the vision, why we're here, purpose, what's important in this business. There's an awful lot. I've put some of you will have read the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. That book is very much about the authoritative or visionary leadership style, we sometimes call it. So lots of explaining why and giving context behind all the decisions that are made. Right. Sometimes if you think, do you know what, I do use the coercive a bit too much and I'd like to use the authoritative a bit more. Sometimes the only difference really is a few words at the end of a sentence saying why you want someone to do something or why something's important. So it doesn't always have to be from behind a lectern. You don't have to be Barack Obama or Winston Churchill to use this. Sometimes it's just about giving more context, helping people understand what the requests are that you're making, and also tracking towards your bigger goals. So when they set standards and monitor performance, it tends to be in relation to the larger vision. Okay, so it tends to be, are we on the right path? Are we heading in the right direction? Are we hitting the right milestones in our long-term vision? Less focus on, have we got everything right absolutely today? And they use a balance of negative and positive feedback. So much more balanced feedback than perhaps the coercive style. So again, give yourself a mark out of 10 on this. How much do you use this? 10 if you use it multiple times every single day. You're always communicating context, why, long-term direction, how this links, and 1 if you never use it at all. So any ideas when this is a good style to use? Pop it in the chat box. Engineers and coders. Interesting. Yeah, good, good. So so a couple of comments on this. One is, so subject matter experts, potentially yes. It's quite important if we think of the context, it's not necessarily about, it's a bit careful about, be a bit careful about categorizing people, because some people will respond better to this than others. And with the management team, yes, the management team definitely needs to understand the vision. We also need the management to push it down. So this is, in the types of situations that this is useful for, is actually most situations, helping people to understand context, why you're asking them to do certain things, what's in it for them, how this will lead forward. This is probably, in fact, the research shows this is one of the most powerful styles that you can use. Certain people will respond better to it than others, for sure, but generally, the more people understand about the context in which they're working, the better they will perform, because they know why they're doing it, and therefore, they know the purpose behind it. Okay. So yeah, a strong style, certainly one that you should be aspiring to have in your armory, I would say. Okay, the next style is the affiliative style. And this style is all about creating harmony. So I've put a little picture there of somebody with their arm around their shoulder. This is about making people feel cared for, making them feel comfortable, and making them feel happy, actually. It's a very, very people-centric style. So most concerned with promoting friendly interactions, making sure that people get along with one another. You quite often see with this style, as in normal circumstances, a lot of social events, lots of chat in the office, lots of emphasis on friendliness. So the leader tends to put a lot of emphasis on meeting people's personal needs, probably more so than performance and goals and standards. This is more about how do we create a congenial atmosphere where everyone's happy, everyone feels comfortable with one another. It's quite a holistic style. It focuses on making sure that people feel cared for and that people are happy. So it's quite a tolerant style in terms of people's personal needs, often allows people to kind of meet their needs outside of work, doesn't hold them too closely to task. But because of that, sometimes they'll avoid performance-related confrontations. So they won't have those difficult conversations because there's a risk that it might upset the dynamic or it might upset the friendliness within the team. And then they reward personal characteristics, maybe as much as job performance. So if somebody's a good person, they like having them in the team, then perhaps they get away with not necessarily performing at the highest level because actually they're a credit to the team and so on. So when is this important? When's it a good style to use? Yeah, definitely when you're looking to build a team, pull people together, a new team, really getting them to make sure that they understand one another. Okay, we've got service-based industries as well. Yeah, can be. Can be. The key point with this is, again, it's a bit of a short-term style of the affiliative. There are particular circumstances where it's really important. So pulling a team together, when there's been disruption, when people have had difficulties perhaps outside of work, or they've had a difficult time in their lives, making sure that they feel cared for, that actually we're here to support them. We're not only here because they are a number on a spreadsheet, is really important. The flip side of the affiliative style, if it's used too much, then actually performance drops off. So there's a point at which being too people focused and not performance focused enough means that they won't necessarily perform at their highest level, and potentially they therefore don't. Okay, so again, be careful with this. In the right circumstance, really important. In some cultures, really important. I did a lot of work in the Middle East, and it was an extremely important style to have there. If you didn't have it, then actually you would struggle to create a great environment. But overused, then actually performance drops off, and there's not enough emphasis on where we're trying to get to. Okay. Next style is the democratic style. Oh, so sorry, on the affiliative as well, just make a note, how much of that do you use? Try and remember how much of that, to mark down how much of that you use, whether that's something you use regularly or not. So next style is the democratic style. And this style is very participative. This is about building commitment and generating new ideas. So getting people on board would be one way of looking at this. So I put there, what do you think? Very much interested in, as the leader, I don't have all the answers. So what do others think? Let's get the team involved. Let's make collective decisions. Let's get the brains in the room working and get the full power of the team. Now, because of that, they have to trust that employees can develop an appropriate direction or come up with good ideas that are worth listening to. There'll be a lot of meetings, typically, lots of conversations, lots of brainstorming. What do we think? How could we do this differently? What can we do more of, less of, and so on. So lots of facilitation from the leader to capture the ideas from the team. They'll listen to people's concerns. So they believe that actually people will who express their concerns have a good reason for doing that, and listen to that and think about, well, is there something we need to change in order to improve that? And they tend to reward adequate performance. They tend, again, not to focus too much on giving negative feedback, largely because if we give negative feedback in that sort of situation, people might clam up, they might stop giving their ideas. Okay, so they try and keep it very open, very participative, lots of different suggestions, and really the intention is to get those ideas, but also to create buy-in. Okay, so you know what question is going to come next. When is this a good style to use? One thing I would say on this style, just while you're typing, be very careful if you know where you want to go, you know the answer that you want to get to, and you try and crowbar this style into the decision making, okay? Because people see through it. I call it the fake democratic style. So if you know where you want to go, and you don't really want to value the inputs of other people, be very careful about using this style, okay? Because if they think, well, why did he even bother asking me? Then you're probably better not to have even asked the question in the first place. But generally a good style to use, and does get quite a lot of employee engagement. Okay, so using education quite a lot. Time consuming despite being a great idea. When expanding into areas away from your core personal expertise, excellent, yeah. So sometimes we don't have all the answers ourselves. And that can weigh, if we feel like we have to, it can weigh very heavy on the shoulders of a leader. So when we don't have all the answers ourselves, when actually we've got real expertise in the room, and we genuinely value the inputs of people, or we need to make collective decisions. But yeah, a few comments there. It can be time consuming. You can be a bit dangerous if you're using it with the wrong people. So you do need to use it with people that you have trust, will come up with good ideas, have something to add, and can then go forward and implement. Okay. Very often good in combination with the authoritative style, the democratic style. So this is where we want to go. This is where we need to get to, is the authoritative style. How best do we get there is the democratic style. So you set the destination, you don't necessarily set the path. They work out, or they contribute to working out the path. Okay. But generally pretty strongly correlated with high employee engagement. If we're asked what we think, if we're asked to come up with ideas, we tend to be more engaged than if we're just told what to do. Okay. Particularly important with people who are experts or have a lot to offer. So experienced people and tapping into that. Okay, the fifth style is the pace setting style. This is the one that I put the Superman pants on my LinkedIn profile yesterday. The emphasis here, leaders who use this style a lot tend to be really focused on getting things done to extremely high standards of excellence. So getting things right, having little tolerance for getting things wrong is really important to the pace setting leader. So let me give you an example of what this is like, and just see if this resonates with anybody. So have you ever been in a situation where maybe you're going to a new place, you've not been there before, but there's a friend of yours who's in a different car who says, do you know what, I know exactly where we're going, follow me. So you're in your car, they're in their car, they go off ahead and you're following them. There's two problems with your friend. One is they drive at 100 miles an hour, and the second is they don't use their indicators. That's pace setting for you. That's at its extreme level, that's pace setting. So they tend to be very good, very fast, know where they want to go, but not necessarily be great at communicating it themselves. They tend to have high standards and lead by example, so they go from the front. But they can be apprehensive, because they want things done to their standards, they can be apprehensive about delegating, so they can take quite a lot on themselves. What that means is, I'll just give it to me, I'll do it, it'll be quicker, or it'll be easier if I just do it this time. But what that means is that they can get overloaded, that they can get quite burnt out. The other thing is it doesn't really develop capability in the team, because actually if you take everything off the team because they haven't quite done it to your standards, after a while that just becomes demotivating. Okay, so be very careful about using this too much. Not a lot of sympathy for poor performance. Pace setting leaders tend to like to work with extremely capable people. Okay, so if you can work at my pace and you can live to my standards, we're going to get along just great. But if you can't, then probably they're going to get left behind. There'll be mutual frustration. Okay, pace setters can sometimes rescue the situation. Okay, they take on, if there's something that's not quite right, they go in, they sort it out themselves. And they tend not to be all that collaborative by nature. Okay, this can be brilliant. So you put in the chat box, A, do you use this style? How much? And B, when is it appropriate? When is it less appropriate? I'll give you some of my own ideas. I'm always working on my pace setting. Early in my career, this was one of my less positive aspects. Yeah, so when a deadline is too close for anything else, or indeed when you just got to get it absolutely spot on. So deliver a project to a tight timeline, yeah. So the timeline very often is the coercive style, because that's about urgency. This is about standards. This is about no mistakes in that document, no mistakes on that project. It has to be spot on. Very often perfectionists are pace setters. Okay, so no, I've used it too much in the pandemic, but at times, yeah. Yeah, and look, and there are always times when this is appropriate. Okay, so sometimes you've just got to roll up your sleeves and get involved in this. And in a crisis, when actually things need to be right, sometimes, or you just need to do the task yourself, sometimes it does need to be used. But just be careful, you know, small drops, use at the right time for the right reasons, and then maybe follow up with one or two of the other styles when you finish kind of overcoming the immediate crisis. Okay. So, and also be careful if you find that you take on too much, or sometimes you feel like you're surrounded by people who are not really capable, just challenge yourself. Are you using this style? Because if you are, then actually it might not be them. It may be that you're not giving them the clarity that they need in order to perform at the highest level. So have a little look internally as well about, is this a style that you use a lot? And if so, is that a change that you need to make? But it can be very effective. Use it a lot. My background is professional services. We use it a lot in professional services where actually the most senior people, the people who get to partner, tend to be good at their jobs. They tend to be the ones who have the highest billing, the best client relationships, the best expertise, and so on. So lawyers, doctors, etc., etc. Okay, so pace setting, and then the last style before we move into a little chat about this is the coaching style. I should say last but not least. So the coaching style is about supporting the long-term development of people. Okay, this is about thinking about actually, it's not about the task, this is about how do you grow in the role that you want to grow into the person that you want to become. So the coaching style, now this isn't necessarily pure coaching. This is not necessarily about always asking the open question and sitting there until they come up with the answers themselves. But the coaching manager does always have that professional development of their team in their mind when they're having conversations with them. So very good at helping to identify strengths and weaknesses. Where are you good? Where are you not so good? Thinking about actually, where do you want to get to? What are your career aspirations? And what does that mean in terms of the job that we're asking you to do now and the steps that you need to take in the future? They will agree with the employee on the roles in the mutual roles in the development process. So, okay, this is what I can do for you, but this is what you need to do. All right, so, you know, what are the things that you could do to develop yourself so that you're there to support, but you're not there to solve the problem for them. Okay. They will give feedback. The feedback they give is to help the person grow. It's not because the task was wrong or so on, but it's to help them improve so that they can be more effective going forward. And they may trade off immediate standards of performance for long-term development. So that's the same point, really. It's about saying, you know what, we can live with this not being perfect for now because we know that this person is on a growth path. They need to go through that. Maybe they need to fail a little bit or get things wrong because they will learn from it. So that emphasis on learning, professional development is really, really strong. So they have lots of career conversations. They're always bearing in mind where the person's looking to go and taking an interest in their professional development as well. So last one of these, how much do you use this? Is this something you use loads? Is it something you don't use a lot? It's a long-term style. So it does take time. And actually when things are a bit urgent, it's tempting to go towards the pace setting style or the coercive style to get things done quickly or to high standards. So there is sometimes a trade-off that you need to think about, okay, what do I need? What's more important here? Getting the task done or actually helping this person to be able to do the tasks going forward and improve and increase their capacity. Okay, yeah, some people are using this. Yeah, when you realize your company can't grow if it's only you knowing what to do and how to do things. Absolutely spot on, Tom. Yeah, really, really important. And it's one of the challenges that business owners often get to, is where they end up getting pulled and pulled. As their business grows, they get pulled and pulled in every direction because they're trying to hold on to everything. And it's really essential that if that's what happens in a business, that we're using a broader range of styles so that we're building the capability of the team. So it's the team doing the work, and it's not the potential of the business is not limited by the capacity or the potential of the owner. Good stuff. Good. So a couple of other thoughts on this. So Kayleen, could we pop up the poll? And let's just see what leadership style do people in the room think that they're using the most. And let's have a little vote. Okay, we've got 6 votes so far. God, I'll tell you what, we've got some good leaders in this room if this is all true. Okay, good. You're getting a bit more of a mix now. Nobody's coercive. Nice bunch. Good. 13, there's, what, 8 people haven't voted yet? Do you get your votes in? Hi, Catherine. That's my, I was just getting you to give you, so you can have multiple. Well, typically most of us have one style that we use more than some of the others. You can potentially have all 6 that you use quite a lot. So it doesn't mean that, you know, there's not a limit on how many styles you can actually be using. It's not that we all have one. And I'll talk to you about that in a moment. Okay, so we've got 16 in. Any last stragglers putting their votes in on the poll? We don't have a single coercive person. We've got 1 affiliative. We've got 2 pace setters, but most of us think we're using the long-term styles the most. So the authoritative, the democratic, and the coaching. Fantastic. Okay, good. So democratic wins. All right. So most of us think we're using the democratic style the most. Good. So there's good news and there's bad news on that. Sorry, let me just stop sharing those results. Close that down. So the good news is, well, you will have seen that I put golf clubs up to begin with. The reason that I put golf clubs up is it's an analogy for leadership styles. So as somebody was saying, it's not actually that you either use one or you use another. Okay, most of us use all of the styles to a greater or lesser degree. We may have, I mentioned that behavior is a function of the person and the situation. We may have our favorite styles that we use regularly because it feels comfortable. It's what we used to, it's maybe what we learned or what we took from other people that we admire. Or it may be that the situation dictates it in certain circumstances, we use certain styles. So it's a little bit, if we've got any golfers, and apologies to those who don't golf or are not into sport, but the analogy is that if you try and go around a golf course, an 18-hole golf course with 1 club, you're going to find some of those shots pretty tricky. Okay, if you've only got a putter, your driving is not going to be very good. The more golf clubs that you've got in your bag, the more you can pull out in the right situation for the right shot when you need it. So all the research shows that actually if you've got a broad range of leadership styles that you can use, and you can adapt them to the different situations, you will create that more positive climate. It's almost guaranteed. I've done the research myself in multiple different cultures, and it's always the same. The breadth, sometimes the balance of the style changes, but the breadth of the style is always important. And leaders who consistently on a daily basis use 3 or more of those styles, particularly the long-term ones, tend to get better climate results and more engaged employees. Okay, so that's the golf club analogy. But let me give you another analogy. So anybody ever heard a recording of their own voice? Now, normally on a Zoom meeting, I'd get you to do a raise of hands, but I'm going to assume that most of us have at some point or other. And I'm also going to assume that on the basis of the hundreds of, well, thousands probably, of leaders that I've worked with over the years, pretty much everybody says, oh God, it was horrible. I don't sound like that at all. Now, we all think that we come across in a particular way. We all have intentions and we all have self-perceptions, but to some extent or other, self-perception is self-delusion as well. So if we think we're using a particular style, it's good and it's important to understand that's the intent of what we're using. But actually the people who really perceive which style we're using are the people who receive that style, i.e. the people who work for you. Okay, so while this is it's an interesting thing to think about, just be aware that because you think you're using particular styles does not necessarily mean that your people would perceive that they're using it. You may come across differently than you intend. So the point I made at the beginning about intention being key, think about if perhaps you have a reputation for being very task focused, but actually you're intending to be coaching, for example, think about the messages that people are interpreting. Are you giving enough positive messages about the intent behind what you're asking people to do? Okay, because sometimes it's just about changing that to change that perception. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have time or resources in this session to kind of do a full leadership program where we get diagnostics and so on, but those things are available in 360 or 180, and they are well worth doing. Okay, so just in the chat box, any what we call blinding flashes of the obvious. So things that actually you're thinking, actually, yeah, that resonates with me. I can take that away, I can use it. And if you have any questions that you'd like, then now's a good time to have a quick chat about that. Somebody said, I don't honestly know if I was talking nonsense in the poll. That's the point that I was making, really, that we think we do certain things and we intend to do certain things, or we like to think we're doing certain things, but actually it's the other people who choose whether we are doing them or not. Yeah, I need to review how often I'm using each. Good.
So we've got a question come in from Thomas saying, what if I want to be CTO, not CEO? How do I find the right CEO?
Wow, that's a big question. Difficult one to answer right now, Thomas. If you want, I can quite happily have a conversation with you offline. I used to do quite a lot in that kind of field, hiring and assessing CEOs. I think if that's a conclusion you've come to, or a thought that's mulling through your head, I think it's a key one, because not everybody who ends up in a leadership position or the top leadership position necessarily wants to be there. So it's really about making sure that you're clear on what you want, you're clear on what that needs to look like, you're clear on what the business needs, but not only in terms of skills and knowledge, but also competency, cultural fit, and so on. But yeah, I'd be happy to have a chat with you offline if that's going to be helpful.
Perfect. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the chat function or the Q&A, we don't mind. So this is more a comment from Paul, but I've got a question leading out of it. So Paul says, I'm more aware my leadership style has changed during the pandemic, probably not for the best. So Mark, what do you recommend? How would you help people kind of go back to a better leadership style if they've maybe strayed during the pandemic?
So I always use this analogy, and it's probably an appropriate one, but it's a little bit like what Alcoholics Anonymous say, is the first thing to know is that you've got a problem. And recognizing that actually is probably a key breakthrough. So if you have that self-awareness to say, actually, I think I've changed and probably not for the better, I think that's a key observation. So well spotted. I think the second thing is then go and test that. So if you've got the relationship with your employees, maybe you've got a couple of trusted employees where you can say to them, look, here's an observation I had. What's your observation? Am I right here? Have I changed? If so, what impact has that had? Because if you can get that feedback, and that's ultimately how we normally run these programs, we get feedback from employees. Because if they give you that, A, they're going to love the fact that you observed it yourself. And B, they can help you to change it. So that does rely on having a good relationship with those employees, but being willing to kind of demonstrate that vulnerability and that humility to say, actually, I think that this has happened. Is that something you recognize? And if so, thinking about what changes we can make. One of the things I use, and it's so simple, but it's so powerful, is there anything that I'm doing that you want me to stop doing? Anything that you want me to start doing? And what should I continue doing? So stop, start, continue is just a really nice way of getting feedback in a very unthreatening way, because it's all about behavior rather than a personal attack. So that's a technique that I use quite a lot. Anything that you want me to stop, start, and continue doing.
Leah said, observation, a personality type can determine leadership style used. Yeah,
definitely. Definitely. So in the 4-circle model, you've got situation, then you've got the person. So the person, part of that is the personality type. That's absolutely true. And, sometimes that can be helpful and sometimes it can be less helpful. So alpha personality types, if we use that model, alpha personality types will often go to the pace-setting and the coercive styles, the more task-focused styles, because they want to get things done. They want things done in a hurry, and those things are important to them. Other people who are a bit more people-focused They might go to some of the more people-y styles, the affiliative, the participant, or the democratic, and so on. So absolutely a very, very true observation.
And we also had a comment from Chris which said, well, this was a lot earlier on, will be interesting to learn how workers can influence their leaders. Do you think they can?
Yeah, they can. They can. One of the key things there is that the leader being open enough to take that feedback.
What do you think the best way is to ask for feedback?
I think it comes back to what we were just saying a moment ago, really. Some of it's about having that humility, that actually, if you recognise that I'm not here to be your boss, but I'm here to help you be as effective as you can be, to help you operate at your full potential, you can start to ask for what do you need from me in order to do that. So you're putting the onus on them to help you to help them, if that makes sense, if I'm not overcomplicating that sentence. So, you know, just having that adult to adult conversation, having that chat about, you know, you have aspirations, what are they? This is what's important in the business. How can I help you? What do you need from me to perform at your highest level and fulfill your aspirations and your potential? That's a key starting point, I think, and not being scared to have that conversation.
And how do you think employees can kind of overcome, because we've had the question before where they've got feedback to give their leader, but it's not positive, but they're scared if they provide it, they might jeopardize their job or have responsibility taken away. Like, how would you recommend a delegate / leader handles that situation?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, Colleen, but
sorry.
That's all right. I mean, it's difficult to give kind of advice on that in general, because each circumstance you need to be careful about how you do that. I think if you put the onus, and it depends on the leader's ego, it depends on their maturity, it depends on the time that you catch them and where their emphasis is. But ultimately, it's about trying to find a way to give that feedback. If you put it onto how to get the best out of me, you know, what would be really helpful for me would be, then you're putting it onto yourself rather than you need to change, kind of thing. So it can slightly soften the blow, and try and open up that kind of conversation. As an organisation, getting your leaders to get feedback as part of the annual review as well. If you haven't got an annual review, at least have an annual review. It should be a lot more regular, but at least. But having those conversations and having a two-way adult to adult conversation, I think, is really the way forward. Difficult, but essential.
Perfect. That's all the questions that we have for now.
Thank you. Good questions. What's the leadership style? That was probably the 7th leadership style, I think, Donald Trump. The Trump style. I have no idea what Donald Trump's leadership style was. I would say he was probably extremely coercive. Yeah, that's about it. I've worked with leaders who really only ever had the coercive style. In fact, there was 2 leaders, a slight anecdote, I'm going slightly off on the tangent, but pull me back. There were 2 leaders that I worked with at the same time. One was a CEO of an investment company, and one was a COO of a very large global ports organization. Both of them came to me at the same time. Both of them had exactly the same profile in terms of their leadership styles and the climate. So both of them were using only the coercive style. I coached them both over a period of about 6 months. The investment guy made no change whatsoever. When we remeasured it, he was exactly the same as he was when he began. The ports guy had transformed. He had four new leadership styles, was creating a great climate for his people, was getting fantastic feedback and getting great performance out of them. Same coach, the same methodology, and so on. The only key difference was actually the ports guy had come because he wanted to change. The CEO had come because HR had suggested that he came and got coaching. So it was never really fully bought into it. Donald Trump would not be bought into coaching. He would not be bought into changing it. So But yeah, interesting question. Very coercive, I would say. Good. All right, let us move on. So the leadership style stuff is really interesting, but remember that the style stuff is interesting because it impacts on climate. So, and climate is the thing that has the impact on performance, all right? So what it feels like, the environment that I'm working in, and can I give of my best? Is the environment set up in such a way that I can actually perform at my best? So that's what we'll look at when we look at climate. So it's people's perception of what it feels like to work here, but specifically focused on, can I deliver at my maximum potential or my optimum potential? Okay, are things set up in a way that I can just get on and do my job and do it well? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about climate. So again, there are 6 dimensions. I'll go through these reasonably breezily. And again, think about in your own business, there are 2 elements to climate actually. One is for those of us who are not right at the top of our organization, we get climate from above, from our leaders. So what's the climate we're working in? And does that make it easy or difficult to actually create a great climate for our people? Because it does impact it. And then there's the climate that we pass on below. And we talk about leaders sometimes, if the climate from above is not great, sometimes the job of the leader is to create an umbrella over themselves to shield the people below them from some of the negative climate they get from above. Okay, so if that's you in your position, if you're adding value as a leader, you're making climate good for your people, regardless of what you're getting from above, but it can be tiring. Okay, so I went for some snazzy graphics on this. I thought I'd colour it up. So the first one is flexibility. This is about, do people feel that there are constraints in the workplace, or actually can they get on and do their job in the way that they see fit? So one element of this is what we call bureaucracy minimized. Are there unnecessary rules, policies and procedures that get in the way of getting things done? Now the key word there is unnecessary. Okay, I'm absolutely not saying that rules, policies, procedures and practices are bad things, because used well, they can be extremely good things. They can help us move faster, be clearer, etc. But if they're unnecessary, basically if there's a load of red tape in the business or things are unclear, then flexibility tends to be lower. And people can't just get on, they have to wade through the treacle of bureaucracy. The other aspect is the feeling that new ideas are easy to get accepted. So if you're using styles like the democratic style, where actually you're asking for ideas, you're taking on board people's suggestions, then flexibility tends to be high. If you're using things like the coercive style, then flexibility tends to be low, because actually you don't get new ideas accepted. We don't have dialogue about the best way of doing things. You're told what to do and you go and do it. Okay, so when flexibility is high, people feel they can get on, they can do things as they see fit. They've got a reasonable amount of ability to cut through red tape. There's not actually that many things holding them back. When it's low, actually they feel like they're fighting against the system. And they're really just implementing what they've been told to do in the way that they've been told to do it. Okay, so again, think about in your team, what would your people say? Or in your business, how flexible is it? Okay, next thing, and I won't ask for when this is good and bad, because actually all of these things, the higher they are typically, or the more you're meeting your people's needs around it, the better performance tends to be. Second thing is responsibility. This is about whether people feel they've got a lot of authority delegated to them and whether they feel they've got full ownership of the jobs. So does stuff get pushed down to me? Do I have a lot of delegated power? Can I get on and do my job without having to check everything with my boss? Or do I actually have to say, look, I'm thinking of doing this, what do you think? Because when actually they feel full ownership, full accountability, then they can get on and do things, but they know that in the end, the success or failure of whatever they're doing comes down to them. Okay, they can't really pass it off onto somebody else. So if they feel fully accountable for it, they can get on and do it. They can do things with a reasonable degree of autonomy and authority, then responsibility tends to be high. Now, there are some instances where you don't want this to be too high. Okay, so again, depending on context and depending on the type of organization, you might not always want this to be right at the top of the charts. So In a very heavily regulated environment, you don't necessarily want people to go off and freewheel and decide to do things differently every single time. In a very safety conscious environment, responsibility, you want people to feel responsible, but you don't necessarily want them to have complete autonomy about how to do things. But generally speaking, keeping responsibility high leads to higher performance and more buy-in from employees. And again, those styles that ask, that get people's ideas on board, that explain why we're doing things in a particular way, tend to have a more positive impact on this. Okay, the next one is standards. So this is the emphasis that is put on performance, doing your best. Okay, so when standards are high, stretching but achievable goals are set. Okay, and they have to be both. They have to be both stretching, so it's not a dead cert that you're going to hit a target or hit a standard of performance, but they're not so outlandishly stretching that actually everyone just gives up and goes home because they know they're never going to hit it. So there's always that kind of emphasis of we're always striving for more. We're always trying to hit a new target. Often there's KPIs in place, there's targets in place. People know what good looks like. That's probably the key thing in standards. We know what good performance looks like and we strive to achieve it. There's also a flip side of that, or another element to it, which is that mediocrity is not tolerated. So if performance isn't forthcoming, that it is actually tackled. Conversations are had around it. It's not just brushed under the carpet or left to other people's devices. So standards are important. It's a very performance driven element, but if you've worked in an organization where standards are high, there's always that kind of stretch. There's always that feeling that, yeah, we need to be given our best. Okay, clear so far? Give me a nod, Kayleen, because you're the only one I can see. Okay. Next one is rewards. Now, I'm not suggesting you have sticky stars on a chart like this picture, but this is when people think of rewards, very often the first thing they think about is money. And rewards is fundamentally not about money. I've certainly done some research in my past where money and pay come about the 6th most important thing in terms of what motivates people at work. It's something you have to get right. You can't be way off. But here's a little fact for you. The most admired companies in the world pay an average of 5% less than their peers, 5% less than the other big corporates. The reason is they don't have to pay as much because they're offering other stuff. People want to work for them. They want the career development that comes with it. So rewards is more about recognition. Yes, money is one way of recognizing people, and it's an important way, but recognition is about feedback. It's about, do I know how I'm doing? And do I know, very importantly, do I know how that is related to how other people are doing? So am I doing better than expected? Am I doing as well as expected? Am I falling below expectations? So there's a relativity to it about, do I know within the business, how well am I performing? So that requires feedback. And one of the styles that's not great at giving feedback is the affiliative style. Okay, so sometimes the intention behind the affiliative is to make people feel very good, but actually people don't necessarily feel rewarded because they don't really know. Everyone gets told that they're doing great and they're all valued. So the high performers tend to get a little bit fed up with that because they're getting treated the same as everybody else. Okay. So making sure that you're rewarding, you're giving feedback, you're giving pats on the back, public recognition, et cetera, differentiated on the basis of performance is key to rewards. Okay. But when it's high, people know how they're doing, they know who's performing best, and they're getting recognized and rewarded for doing good work. Got a bit of a lag on my laptop. Okay, next one is clarity. So clarity is knowing what's expected of me and understanding how that relates to what the organization is trying to achieve. So when you've got clarity, you're talking about, I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm doing it, I know how it fits in with what other people are doing, I know how the organization works, so I know who I need to go to in order to get this problem solved, or if this happens, I know what the systems and processes are I need to follow in order to achieve things. So it's when you've got clarity, you've got more of a well-oiled machine where people know exactly what they need to be doing on a day-to-day basis, but also why they need to be doing it, because this is where we're going. This is the mission and direction of the business. This is what our purpose is. This is what's important around here. So having clarity is a really big determiner of overall climate. And yeah, it's an important one. Let me just say that much. And then last but not least is team commitment. Now, team commitment tends to come partly as a consequence of getting some of the other stuff right. So if you've got all those other bits in place, then team commitment inevitably comes out pretty high. People tend to feel bought in. They tend to feel proud to belong to the organisation. They tend to give extra effort if it's needed. They tend to give that discretionary effort that otherwise they might leave on the table. And the key point here is that people understand that they're working towards a common objective. It's not them working in silos, but they're actually working towards, as a group, as an overall team, they're working towards something bigger than just their own personal task. And they give what's needed for the greater benefit of the organisational team. All right. So when team commitment looks like that, it doesn't have to be above ground, but everybody's working in synchronicity, in tandem, and pulling in the same direction. So, Kelly, we've got our second poll.
Yeah, it's launched and along the bottom.
Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of flavour to this. So if you were going into a new organisation, let's say you're going into the new organisation as a CEO, and you found that actually people are not as engaged as you would like them to be, what are the two climate dimensions you think would have the biggest impact to work on first to turn that performance around? Okay, got a responsibility and clarity one. Oh, Rita Stevens, responsibility and clarity, pulling ahead. Good. We've got 7 people left to vote. 6. We're getting close. We're getting very close to the right answer. It's a clue there. No, I reckon that's it. So responsibility and clarity, we were very close. So actually the two most important things that have the biggest impact on overall climate and therefore overall performance, clarity and standards. If you get those two things right in your business, I promise you results will go up. That's dangerous, isn't it? You're recording this, I promise something. But all the evidence I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of this evidence, if you can get clarity and standards in place, the other stuff follows. So be clear with people about what you expect, be clear about where you're heading, be clear about how it all fits together, have systems and processes in place, be clear about what good looks like and hold them to account on that, and performance will go up. Good stuff. Good. All right. So in the chat, not in the chat room, but any comments, observations, or indeed questions about opportunities to improve your climate or things that you could potentially work on?
So we did receive a question during your presentation. So do you find controlling costs harder when responsibility is delegated, either by people going in different directions or lots of time spent in communication meetings? Revenue might then go up, but the lag is a problem.
Yeah. So I think that comes down to clarity. It's clarity and standards again. So yes, it does potentially take time, but helping people to understand what's important, why it's important, what their responsibilities are around that, and then holding them to account, monitoring it, tracking it, making sure that that's reported back. Yeah, it does. You have to invest a bit of time to get the return, but that's the same with any investment. But if you're doing that right, and if people are really understanding it, then that should pay dividends over the longer term. And that goes not only for revenue focus, but any kind of initiative you're trying to implement. There is an investment in time up front. Sometimes you do have to take a little bit of a dip, but the consequence of not getting that right is actually you'll probably spend more time over the long term trying to put it right. So.
Thank you. So it's just checking if anyone else wants to ask a question. You can verbally ask, just virtually raise your hand or pop in the chat that you would like to verbally ask a question. That's not a problem.
Perhaps, Kayleen, if nothing's coming through, I assume that's because I've given crystal clarity. Perhaps I can just jump in here before people jump off and just make an offer or suggestion, and also just ask for some feedback so that we can always improve on things. We talked about feedback for the importance of it for leaders. It's also important for us. So one thing is, at the moment, I'm offering gifted coaching sessions to any business owner. So if there are any questions that you have, either about leadership, but also about business in general, you'd like to explore a little bit about whether there's something that you could be doing differently in your business, or actually just get some coaching around a particular issue. In December and January, I'll be offering those. So if you'd like to take me up on that, you're more than welcome. And if you would, or even if you wouldn't, frankly, what I would appreciate is if you could just fill in the feedback form that Kayleen will send a link to. That is really important, A, because it helps us to understand what we've done well and what we could do better. But B, just so that if you would like any kind of follow-up, then we know how to get hold of you. So I would just ask you to, it should take less than 2 minutes. I would just ask you to do that.
Thank you. Just to confirm, I will be sharing Mark's presentation with you all, along with the feedback link, and I'll CC Mark in so you can then go back to him if you're interested in the gifted coaching sessions and you're a business owner. So I know we've got 15 minutes left, but I'm happy to close shop early if, Mark, you are finished.
Yeah, if there are no more questions, I'm happy to answer any questions if people want to stay on, or if perhaps, yeah, if people want to stay on, or if they want to email me separately, maybe they don't want to go in public forum about their questions, I'm more than happy with that as well.
Perfect. So let us know what you want us to do. If you've got any questions, just pop in the chat. I'm busy writing, or yes, I've got a question, or if you would prefer to answer, go back to Mark after the email that I sent, then that's fine. Just let us know. We're here to do whatever you would like us to do.
Great. Thanks for that feedback, John, and also somebody who was anonymous. Oh, I couldn't see the name, so thank you. I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah, fantastic.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go with people who found it useful, and Mark, they will come back to you if they've got any questions. So it's just to say thank you so much for joining us on this less misty Wednesday morning. As I said, I will share all the information with you along with Mark's contact details, so you can contact him regarding any further questions you have, and also if you're a business owner for your gifted coaching sessions. So yes, thank you so much for joining us. Mark, is there anything you want to say finally?
No, just feel free to, it'd be great to connect with some people on LinkedIn if you'd be interested in doing that. I do share some content similar to this on LinkedIn, so if you're interested in learning more about this type of stuff, then it'd be great to connect, and I may send some of you an invitation as well. But thanks for laying this on, Kayleen, as well.
Pleasure, as always, and I'll include Mark's LinkedIn in the post-event email as well. Also, did you want to, if not, I can do it, I don't mind. Mark is running a 6 steps to build a business that works workshop in January. Now this is for members only, and I will share the link in the post-event email, but Mark, I didn't know if you wanted to tell people quickly about that and then we can leave.
Sure. Yeah, so that will be about sharing with you how to build a business that can work without you. So if some of these leadership styles have resonated with you, perhaps that you take too much on, too much rests on your shoulders, and you know, ultimately you feel like the business isn't working, it's you who's working extremely hard, that would be a good one. If you want freedom from your business at some point in the future, that would probably be something of interest to you. So hopefully see some of you on that as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, and hopefully we will see you all soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, week, and yeah, see you later.